Hello everyone. Today we're gonna analyze everything stuck to him from the book What We Talk About When We Talk About Love by Raymond Carver. Our names are Silvana Gonzalez and Juan Esteban Carvajal, and today we're gonna analyze the plot, the setting, characterization, conflict, theme, figurative language, and narrative technique. The point of view, the story is told in third person because the narrator is not in there, and also because it's a narrative frame of a story within a story. It's called juxtaposition, which portrays that who is narrating the story is someone who knows everything as a primary source and narrates this in both stories, showing congruent arguments that makes the readers realize everything he point was like that. This could be an evidence in the part that it says, "You can remember," she says, "go on." Speech. Through the story, we can see that has report of speech because the characters are not directly talking, so that the narrator doesn't use quotation marks because it's the narrator's own speech. That means that the narrator is not saying literally the same, but says the same with other words without being really expressive because it's something that he is not saying. The report of speech means some specific details that could be relevant to the story and for us, the readers. For that, we use two quotes. The first one is when it says, "Tell the story," she says. And the other one is, "I don't believe you," he said, jumping up from the table.
Tenth, she's in Milan, open quotation marks, she's in Milan for Christmas and wants to know what it was like when she was a kid, close quotation marks, page 127. This shows us the part from the story that is in the present, and this allows the reader to understand they're having a conversation in the present, but although they're talking something that already happened. What this has as effect on the reader is that the reader is able to know the information is veridic and from a primary source due to the fact the one who's telling the story is someone near or the one who lived the story. The quote to illustrate the past tense is open quotation marks. There were kids themselves, page 128. The word were is in past and highlight it is a memory. A theme. Starting from the title, we are allowed to see a theme of responsibility and unity from these quotes. Open quotation marks. The girl said, "I'm your wife, this is your baby." Close quotation marks, page 132. Second quote. Open quotation marks. "You heard what I said," the girl said. "If you want a family, you're going to have to choose." Close quotation marks, page 133. Taking into account these two quotes, the reader is able to understand the relation between the title and the circumstances, such as the one proposed before. This generates in the reader the perception of unity. They are starting to have a family. In the same way, it shows how is everything stuck to him in a matter of responsibilities and priorities, talking from the boy. Motive and symbols. Through the story, there is a symbol which is constantly repeated, and it becomes a motive. We have to illustrate this. We have two phrases, three quotes. Sorry. The first one is open quotation marks. "Baby, baby," the girl said with tear in her eyes. Close quotation marks. Page 132. A second quote, open quotation marks. "After dinner, he turned up the furnace and helped her bath the baby." Close quotation marks, page 130. Third quote, open quotation marks. "It was the baby's cries that woke him up." Close quotation marks, page 130. The symbol baby as a word becomes in a motive that the author portrays with the purpose to enforce unity as part of the theme. Also, it relies for helping the reader to understand the baby and the linking part of the linking part of the relation.
Okay, the plot. Taking into account the first story, that is the one that the girl were in Milan, we can see an exposition based on the structure of plot, because in the part that it says she is in Milan for Christmas and wants to know what it was like when she was a kid, is the beginning of the story, and the author is giving really brief description. I mean, gives key aspects about the characters and the setting that are really important to us to understand what is the story about and why in this case the story is about something that already happened. Also, we can see a rise in action in the part that he says, "What do you want to hear?" He says, "What else can I tell you? I could tell you about something that happened when you were a baby. It involves you," he says, but only in a minor way. So here is the point where the story develops and it generates a little tension in the reader because nobody knows what the man is going to tell the woman, if it's something good or bad. So the author makes that the reader wants to keep reading. Finally, we can see a denouement when he says, "Then she raises her head, speaking brightly. She asks if he is going to show her the city. After all, he says, 'Put your boots on and let's go.'" This is the end of the story, and everything turns back to the normality. And after the interesting story that the man tells, they continue with the things they have planned. Also, as a reader, we can infer that the woman doesn't live in Milan and the man does live in there, so that's why he is going to show her the city.
Juxtaposed plot as the plot that we see through the much time in the story, but is a story that the author primarily juxtaposed to the one he starts talking. So the exposition, open quotation marks, they were kids themselves, but they were crazy in love. This 18-year-old boy and the 17-year-old girl, when they married, not all that long afterwards, they had a daughter. Close quotation marks, page 128. So here we can see that the narrator is giving key information about the short story he juxtaposed over the other one we see in the beginning. He contextualized by describing the characters and how long the couples met each other as a part of the exposition. This is important to the reader because this helps understand what is going to happen later and what was the context of what happened before. The rising action. Open quotation marks. It was the baby's cries that woke him up. Close quotation marks. Page 130. In this part of the story is when the tension is perceived by the reader because here is when the baby of the couple starts to cry without reason all the time. So as the reader we can infer that something is going wrong, and also for the parents it's really annoying listen to the baby cry without being able to do something as part of the rising action without giving a startings to the climax. Analyzing the climax, open quotation marks, you're going to have to choose, the girl said. Carl or us, I mean it. Close quotation marks, page 132. Here we can see the turning point of the story at the maximum climax level, because it's the part where the woman forces her husband to choose. So for us, like readers, it's something really crazy because the woman doesn't have any reason, and that is not a solution. This is something immature. For the reader is really exciting because we don't know what the man is going to decide because it's something without sense. So what the climax here is trying to propose also and to portray, what the author is trying to portray is that they have derived having the baby as the center of the relation, and the girl is creating this circumstance in which the boy it's forced to do something he isn't used to do, which is decide. The following action, open quotation marks, I am sorry, the girl said, close quotation marks, page 133. And this part is when the woman reflects about her actions because although her husband prefers his family more than anything, she's really possessive with him. So here is the moment when the woman really understands that she does not need to be a crazy person because her husband has not given her any reason to think that he's a bad father. Inclusively, this moment demonstrates her that the man has the reason and the one that is wrong is herself. So as part when we arrive to the climax, the reader is able to understand that she knows when to ask for forgiveness and it start being the following action. For the denouement, open quotation marks, we won't fight anymore, she said. The boy said, we won't, close quotation marks, page 134. Finally, everyone is happy and both noted that they can't fight without reason and that they need to be more together and supporting each other because they have a responsibility that goes before everything, which is the baby. And in this sense, the reader is able to understand, even though they're a young couple, they are quite understanding what a family represents and which are the responsibilities and priorities they need to take. The main conflict that we can see in this short story is character versus character. The boy versus the girl, mainly arguing for the boy's responsibilities toward his family as a father. For the quote we took is open quotation marks, you're going to have to choose, the girl said. Carl or us, close quotation marks, page 133. This reflects on the confusion of responsibilities he had as a father. Also, this demonstrates which were the results of being young parent. Maybe this is one of the attempts from Carver to prevent young marriage and pregnancy. So, as a conclusion, it's precise to state this conflict affects generates a consciousness on the reader as being a conflict of character versus character.
Okay, the characterization of the juxtaposed story, we're gonna analyze the boy and the girl and the boy with the dialogues. We can infer as a reader that he is a submissive person, that always everything that he said is really respectful, and he expressed with many calm. So for us, is a mature person who have clear his priorities. We can see this in the part that he says, "It was my fault," he says. By his actions, in the part that he says he turned off the motor and sat a while, and then he got out and went back inside. This helps us to see that even though he is really mad, he never makes something that hurts someone. Here we can see that way he controls himself without making any harmful act. And finally, bad his thoughts in the part that he says, the boy was a little in love with Sally, just as he was a little in love with Betsy, who was another sister the girl had. Here we can infer that he is such a ladies' man who has desires of many women at the same time, instead of having eyes just for his wife.
With the analysis of the girl as a character and its characterization, we're going to start with the dialogue. She's always certainly possessive towards her husband, totally. And this is seen in the quote, open quotation marks. The girl said, I'm your wife, this is your baby, close quotation marks, page 132. Said quote refers to the position she represents on that marriage as a possessive character with a strong dialogue, which allows the reader to understand that she is always trying to use emotionally arguments that will force her husband to do whatever she wants. Such arguments as the one stated in the quote. For the actions, she knew to ask for forgiveness when needed, and when this is seen in this quote, Open quotation marks. I'm sorry, the girl said. Close quotation marks. I didn't mean, open quotation marks. I didn't mean it to snap like that. Close quotation marks. Open quotation marks. You sit down, the girl said. How does a waffle sound with bacon? Close quotation marks. Page 133. This shows that even though she was mean while talking, she knew that fighting was not the answer, generating in the reader a feeling of her as the leader of on the relation who managed things at her side. Basically, very similar what we found in dialogue and the actions. For thoughts, it's a more positive aspect of her in which we found open quotation marks. On top of this, they had great ambitions. They were always talking about the things they were going to do and the places they were going to visit, to go. Close quotation marks, page 129. Even though this quote does not talks about only the girl, but both of them, with this quote the reader is able to identify precise feature of her attitude, such as the one, she's an ambitious young girl. This feature or characterization is the support of the statement she was an important leader in the relation, letting know the reader what the author want to position her in the relation with her husband.
The setting. In the first lines of the short story, it says she is in Milan for Christmas and wants to know what it was like when she was a kid. So they're in Milan, and with just saying it's Christmas, the reader can deduce it's winter and it's snowing. The characters are shaped by the setting because when they are talking, they are drinking something called strega, and taking into account that strega is an Italian herbal liquor. The figurative language in the whole story, we find only one simile, that is open quotation marks. The grass, where was of it, looked like canvas. Close quotation mark. Page 130. So the grass is compared to a canvas because the author wants to highlight the aspect that there is too cold and the grass is frozen by the snow. So that's why it's compared to a canvas, because a canvas is something really hard. In this part, we can see how the author is clarifying the atmosphere.